an urgent threat. While the global community has been working on climate action for over 30 years, the pace of progress has been slow. We need to understand symbiosis and how the planet's ecosystem works and catalyze industry sectors to work with it. In response to this need, the World Economic Forum set up the Climate Governance Initiative to support the growing awareness and development of climate-effective board governance. Across key jurisdictions, local chapters are being set up in which corporate directors convene to establish effective climate governance in the corporations they are overseeing. Climate Governance Malaysia is the Malaysian chapter of the World Economic Forum's Climate Governance Initiative. Its mission is to support non-executive directors in acquiring the practical skills to help steer companies through an effective climate transition strategy, taking into account the need for financial stability, increased resilience, and sustainability. One of the education programs of Climate Governance Malaysia is the monthly webinars. Today's webinar is the first one. These webinars will be free for all to access. I will now proceed to introduce our first keynote speaker, Dr. Gary Becerra, who is Consultant Technical Advisor to the Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Center. Dr. Gary has more than a decade of experience in climate change and sustainability policy. I first met Dr. Gary in January 2019. He was the Special Functions Officer of Mestec, Minister YB Yobiin at that time. He hosted a meeting for WWF and the Forest Stewardship Council. What impressed me the most at that meeting was his capacity to listen deeply, understand, and guide. These qualities must have contributed to his success in securing the trust of the 134 developing countries of the Group of 77 and China in nominating Malaysia as their lead coordinator in the 3-year Paris Agreement process from 2012 to 2015. The Group of 77 at the United Nations is a coalition of 134 developing countries designed to promote members' collective economic interest and improve joint negotiating capacity in the United Nations. Today, Dr. Gary is going to give us an overview of the Malaysian government's climate governance and efforts. Dr. Gary, an overview of the Malaysian government's climate governance and efforts. Over to you, Dr. Gary.
Thank you very much, Ms. Leong. Your Excellency, Ambassador Dag Julian Denfeld, Ms. Sarah Heaton, Swedish Trade Commissioner to Malaysia, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning and good day, depending on where you are. I'd like to begin by expressing my appreciation to Climate Governance Malaysia for inviting me to participate in this webinar. It is indeed an honor to be able to say a few words about how Malaysia perceives the current climate crisis and perhaps our approach towards solving it. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're like me and live and work in the Klang Valley of Kuala Lumpur, then you've had first-hand experience of systems failure. In this case, a water management systems failure. The supply was interrupted first by a water contamination event, and then by a mechanical failure, and then once again by another water contamination event. Now, the good news is that the authorities are taking these unscheduled interruptions very seriously and are ramping up monitoring and enforcement, as well as improving and upgrading storage facilities. But the fact of the matter is that similar and perhaps even more severe interruptions could have been caused by any one of a host of different situations. We've had extended periods without rainfall that first reduced the dilution factor in rivers, rendering the water untreatable, but that later dropped river levels so low that they were below the intakes of water treatment plants. So adequacy and integrity within the water management system are essential for the sustainability of the water supply. But integrity within systems alone is inadequate because a system failure could be caused by a failure in a different but a related system. So some time ago, we had a water system interruption because of a fire in an electrical substation that cut off power to a pumping station that delivered the water to our homes. In other words, the level of interrelatedness and interdependence of our systems cannot and must not be underestimated. We will not overcome the challenge of sustainability if we pin our hopes on fixing any one sector or system, but do not address weaknesses and inadequacies in a comprehensive manner in all our systems. Our water management system, our energy management system, and it controls our water management system, our mobility system, which depends on our energy management system, our food production and delivery system, which also rely on our energy systems, and all these systems will require a fully functional information and communication system. Such a system would not only help us to match how much is needed, where and when, with how much is available, where and when, but could monitor real-time performance, including through wear and tear induced vibration detection, through leakage detection, in order to optimize maintenance schedules, or even detect anomalies in consumption patterns which might point to theft or other illegal activities. In Malaysia, the good news is that we are blessed with resources everywhere. It rains everywhere, the sun shines practically everywhere during the day, and 24 hours a day, gravity makes rivers and streams flow. So, although resources like energy and information are needed everywhere, likewise, energy and information resources are available everywhere. I may be a human resource, but I do not work in the Klang Valley and Kuala Lumpur alone, but virtually I can and do work around the world. And distributed production seeks to capitalize on that paradigm. In the interest of the bottom line, sometimes journalists and moderators are very fond of asking that final question. It usually begins like this. If there was one action, if there was one little thing I should do, and when this happens, I feel compelled to very politely stop them and say, no, one action and one little thing won't cut it. We are in this situation because everyone has been doing everything in the old normal way. And recent modeling tools have shown us that there is no system, technology, or sector that can single-handedly help us solve the climate crisis. There are no carve-outs in our lifestyle that we can allow to remain untouched if we are to be committed to sustainability. The only way we will survive is if everyone does everything in the new normal way. And there is much that we can learn from our Scandinavian and in particular our Swedish partners. It will not be easy, but in more ways than one, the COVID-19 situation has shown us that we are more capable than we often realize. At the Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Center, or MGTC, we learned that we could work from home without sacrificing productivity. And so we have adopted a work from home Friday with an estimated 17% reduction in staff commuting emissions. But even in moving to a distributed production approach, we need to adopt a smart and nuanced methodology. Resources may be everywhere, but they're in different forms. And we need to appreciate that the different forms these resources take make them useful in different ways. Going back to our water resource issue, under a centralized system like we use now, we have a one pipe in, one pipe out system. One pipe in from a centralized supply system and one pipe out to a centralized waste system. We use only potable water and we produce only black water. But under a distributed production system, we would produce and use untreated water, which we would harvest from rainfall. We would use potable water. We would produce and use gray water and produce black water. Now, I could go into the uses of black water, but that would take far too long. So I'll stop right there and move over to energy. In the same way, our rooftops are a source of photovoltaic and thermal energy. Our cooling appliances are a source of thermal energy. Under a distributed production system, our food would be grown everywhere, in our homes, in community gardens, on public lands, as well as on farms. Under the new normal mindset, we should acknowledge that resources are where and how you find them, whether they're used or produced. And sustainability demands that we learn from the experiences of others while taking bold and innovative steps to create our own body of indigenous sustainability knowledge. In closing, I would like to share with you a quote by Mr. Taiji Yoshida, the Chief Strategy Officer at Mitsubishi Power in Yokohama, Japan. It's a quote about energy, but it is, I believe, profound enough to apply to any resource we use or produce. Mr. Yoshida says, there are two important factors to think about for the future of energy. One is sustainability, which means we are thinking about the next generation, about children, about grandchildren. We look to create the circular society where nothing is wasted. The other factor is diversified energy, that the best way of using energy is as a mixture. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gary, for highlighting the importance of systems thinking in promoting sustainability. Next, I will proceed to introduce His Excellency Dato Danfeld. His Excellency is Swedish Ambassador to Malaysia. Before coming to Malaysia, he was Ambassador of Sweden to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and non-resident Ambassador to the Sultanate of Oman, State of Kuwait, and Republic of Yemen. In his 30 years of foreign service career, his greatest satisfaction comes from having a sense of what he does is not only for his salary, but contributes to the common good through foreign policy. Swedish foreign policy is international in nature because it is solidarity-based. Prevention of conflict and conflict resolution are also close to his heart. War is highly unsustainable because it damages and devastates the environment. Traditional diplomacy thus continues to have an important role to play in the advancing of sustainability. I first met His Excellency in March this year at a seminar that the Swedish Embassy hosted on the subject of environmental justice. I was impressed to hear His Excellency say that Sweden has a directive for Swedish embassies to choose sustainable products when options are available, even if the cost is higher. Consistency in sustainability practices across national boundaries is a challenge for many multinational companies. Today, His Excellency is going to give us a quick overview of the interactions on sustainability between the Swedish government and industry. His Excellency Dato Danfeld, a quick overview of Swedish government and industry interactions on sustainability. Over to you, Your Excellency.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, YY. Thank you very much, Dr. Gary, for an excellent presentation. And thank you to Climate Governance Malaysia for allowing me and my fellow Team Sweden representatives to share some perspectives today, from a Swedish base. I hope that everyone can hear me loud and clearly. If not, please send me a signal. I will begin my remarks by noting the rather gloomy current situation of our globe, and then say a few words on the Swedish perspective with an historic background, and then a more forward-looking view on the challenges ahead. To begin, the picture ahead of us is grim, no doubt. Recent UN reports on the effects of climate change and on the rapid eradication of biodiversity send alarming signals about the direction of development of our planet. The United in Science report and the 5th Global Outlook on Biodiversity, published a few months ago, is gloomy reading indeed. Unless we manage to dramatically curb harmful emissions, as agreed in the Paris Climate Agreement, and learn to better respect and conserve our natural resources and biodiversity, we will not be able to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals set by the universally adopted UN Agenda 2030, which in its turn will mean that we will be entering an uncharted and unforeseeable future, which will affect our children, the next generations of global citizens. The challenge is very clear. Global emissions need to be halved by 2030, and the world must achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. It is the target of, if the target of 1.5 global warming, 1.5 degrees global warming is to stand a chance to be achieved. These goals remain achievable, but time is running short. The UN Secretary General Guterres has urged all countries, especially the G20 countries, to commit to carbon neutrality before 2050. With a view to the ongoing COVID-19 crisis, the UN Secretary General has urged global leaders to take action to ensure that governments incorporate meaningful climate action in COVID-19 recovery initiatives, inter alia, by encouraging and supporting green investments and creating green jobs, by not bailing out polluting industries, and by phasing out fossil fuel subsidies, and by taking into account climate risks in all financial and policy decisions. In line with this, it was very encouraging that the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, in his inaugural speech to IGEM 2020 Monday, mentioned both COVID-19 and climate as major challenges to be tackled. The Prime Minister identified sustainability and circular economy as 2 priority areas for Malaysia in the budget for 2021. From the Swedish perspective, high priority is attached to environmental, social, and economic sustainability, and to the implementation of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals in both public and private sectors. At national level, we have achieved some results as a result of close cooperation and coordination between government and private sector. But the problem is these days international and transboundary. Thus, solutions require international cooperation and coordination. However, the first steps must always be taken at home. A quick view in the historic rear mirror reminds us Swedes that not so long ago, in the 1970s, Sweden had serious pollution problems. At the time, oil exceeded more than 70% of the total Swedish energy consumption. Swedish air was polluted by industrial and transport emissions. The main part of waste went to landfills, and we had problems with poisonous waste being dumped into the environment. This was before the era of awareness of the global warming phenomenon. But at national level, the situation catapulted action, and set in motion a process of revised political targets for environmental, industrial, and energy policies, which combined with economic instruments to promote innovation and competition between different sustainable technologies, achieved change that has increased economic, environmental, and social sustainability while maintaining economic growth. One of the instruments introduced was the carbon dioxide tax in 1991, which has proved to be quite a powerful tool to increase sustainability and to push industry to innovate and adapt to more cleaner means of production. Fast forward to 2020, when sustainability and environment are no longer national issues, but global challenges of substantial magnitude. As the scale of the challenges are becoming increasingly apparent, government policies and corporate culture and governance are going through substantial adaptation to become more sustainable. Sweden's energy basket has shifted from fossil to renewables, which now make up more than 55% of the total energy consumption in Sweden. Waste management has created business opportunities in recycling and waste to energy, with the result that approximately 99% of household and municipal waste is being reused. Total emissions have been reduced by more than 20%, measured by the 1990 levels, while economic growth since then has increased by 60%, or more than 60% as a matter of fact. Sweden and the European Union, which Sweden is a member of, aim to reduce carbon emissions by 55% by 2030. And Sweden must achieve carbon neutrality by 2045, according to a law adopted with strong bipartisan support in the Swedish parliament. For the EU as a whole, I think the 50% target is to be achieved by, carbon neutrality is to be achieved by 2050 still, but there's an ongoing discussion among EU institutions on how to calibrate the phasing out of fossil fuels and carbon and achieve carbon neutrality. Historically, business and industry has been major sources of unsustainable pressure on our planet. It's undeniable, from the use of natural resources to ecosystem change and greenhouse gas emissions. But business and the private sector also represents the ability to provide solutions. Through innovation and technological development, harmful effects of industrial activities can be reduced and eliminated. By incorporating environmental and social sustainability as core business values, by developing new technologies, making use of digital tools to reduce ecological footprints, the private sector is becoming the driver and provider of solutions to the current environmental challenges. Sustainability might be perceived as a moral imperative, but more importantly, it is good business. For companies taking long-term perspectives on competitiveness and profitability, sustainability leadership is a necessity. A few final words on Sweden and Malaysia. We have a long track record of engagement in Malaysia, a country with which we enjoy, honor to enjoy very good and warm relations. We have about 100 companies established here, many of whom are innovative leaders of sustainability in their respective fields. We have two of these companies with us here today, Scania, a leader in sustainable transport solutions, and Ericsson, a world leader in digitalization, who will share their perspectives on corporate sustainability. And before that, my esteemed colleague, the Swedish Trade Commissioner, Sara Hedin, who has a strong background in industry, will share her insights on corporate sustainability. So with those words over from me, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for telling the story of how Sweden transformed from a polluted country to the world's most sustainable country. And you highlighting that carbon tax was instrumental in moving industries to improve on their sustainability goals. As you may know, the carbon tax, the notion of carbon tax is facing quite a lot of resistance in Malaysia. Okay, next, I'm going to introduce the second keynote speaker, Sara Hedin. Sara Hedin is Swedish Trade Commissioner to Malaysia. She brings broad international experiences to her role, having worked in markets across Sweden, the United States, Singapore, and most recently, Malaysia. She thrives in working with people from different cultures, both in her roles within multinational companies in Sweden, and even more so during her time in Southeast Asia. Her greatest satisfaction in work comes from helping Swedish companies reach their full international potential. I can clearly see and feel her passion for this role in the short time I've known her and worked with her to organize this webinar. Today, she is coming to this webinar with top Swedish companies to share how they achieve competitive advantage through the pursuit of sustainability. Besides being a keynote speaker, she will also moderate the panel discussion later. Sara Hedin, From Compliance to Competitive Advantage, an introduction to Swedish sustainable business. Over to you, Sara.
Thank you very much, Ms. Leong, for those very kind words. I hope you can hear and see me as well. Very good.
Sarah,
Dr.
we can't
Gary,
see you.
you can't see me, but you can hear me.
Yes.
Very good. I think the video should come through in a minute, hopefully, or in a second. Let me start. Yeah. Hopefully it should come soon there. So thank you again, Ms. Leong. And I would just also like to thank Climate Governance Malaysia for inviting us to this very important webinar and for hosting this series of webinar. And also thank you to Dr. Gary and His Excellency for very awakening introductions and presentations. So I would like to spend the next 10 to 15 minutes giving an overview to our view on sustainable business, what key drivers and success factors there are, and also to highlight what the challenges are. I will share some examples, but most of all, we will hear some real examples from Ericsson and Scania, Ellen and David, who will share their business view of sustainability. So first, to start off with, when we speak about sustainable business, the term sustainable business is used to describe the work that companies do that has a positive impact on society, the environment, and the economy. But it is not only limited to what companies do. As important is also how companies are doing it and how they have integrated sustainability into their business by making it a core part of their operations and value chain. And just to also give a bit, when we're speaking about terms, when we speak about sustainability here in this context, I base our definition on the 4 areas that the UN Global Compact has defined: the human rights, working conditions, anti-corruption, and the environment. And within these 4 areas, companies are responsible to avoid and to mitigate adverse effects of doing business, regardless of where in the world their business is conducted. So no matter where the businesses take place, the environmental impact of operations affects us all. And awareness of humanity's global environmental impact has increased in the recent years, not only within the political sphere, but mostly across businesses as well, and among their investors and customers. But I would say it's not only the risks that businesses need to be aware of. There are also great opportunities for companies that are committed to improve the environment and working to reduce their own negative environmental impact. And this is something I will come back to a bit later. A couple of weeks back, in one of the September issues, The Economist had a special report on business and climate change, highlighting a number of key risks that companies will need to plan for already now. The first one they mentioned was increased physical impact. We already today see the severe effect of extreme weather, and this will only continue to get worse. And companies will need to have resilience and contingency plans in place to minimize these disruptions on their supply chain, but also on their facilities. And we have already seen this in action during the pandemic already, and this is something that definitely will need to continue. And then increased regulations is another risk. Increased costs on carbon are driving companies to update their solutions and to rework their business model. And this is also something we will see even more of as the costs continue to increase. And then the third risk highlighted is legal risks for companies. With improved linkage now between weather events and climate change, and also an increased awareness among regulators and judges, the legal risks will continue to grow. And this will also require companies to innovate and find new solutions to reduce climate impact. So these are some of the risks that companies will need to plan for. But then in parallel to these risks, there are also a number of opportunities that companies would want to plan for. So for example, the first one, customer demand is shifting. What we now see is that more and more customers are willing to pay a premium for sustainable products and services. According to a recent report that Nielsen did, 66% of global consumers were willing to pay more for goods coming from companies that were committed to social and environmental sustainability. And if you pinpoint and looked at the millennials in particular in this report, the result even rise to 73%. So there is definitely a shift when it comes to customer demand. And then also we see a shift among employees, where sustainability is becoming a key area for talent attraction and retention. Again, another survey made by Nielsen states that 67% would prefer to work for a socially responsible company. And 13% of the millennials in this report even considered leaving their current employer to work somewhere for a company that is doing more to tackle climate change. As an example, we have the Swedish company Spotify that highlighted that their focus on sustainability is, and I'm quoting here, not only a decent benefit with respect of equal labor rights, it is actually differentiating Spotify from our competitors. It gives us the opportunity to attract and to keep the best international talents, which in turn leads to increased productivity and profitability, end of quote. And then finally, like His Excellency mentioned, sustainability is good business. We see now a wave of innovation spurred out of the risks highlighted before, where companies now are almost forced to quickly come up with new solutions. And the upside is that these solutions actually turn out to be not only sustainable, but also cost efficient. And then as well, we see growth opportunities found, especially in the areas of adaptation. For example, as we can see that the physical impact increase, we see new solutions within areas such as agriculture and infrastructure being developed, such as resilient crops, seawalls, etc. So there are clearly opportunities to work with sustainability. And actually, this is nothing new. Actually, already in 2015, Harvard Business School conducted a study which showed that high sustainability companies outperform low sustainability companies, both when it comes to shareholder value as well as performance. So if it is that clear, how come not all companies are doing everything they can to become more sustainable? Well, I think most, if not all companies, actually do have long-term sustainable ambitions. The challenge is the gap between those long-term ambitions and the short-term business as usual actions, where the short-term focus tends to get most of the attention from both managers and shareholders. But the companies that have truly managed to incorporate sustainable business are the ones that have found a way to bridge that gap between the long-term visions and the actions. And they have done so by embedding sustainability into their business strategy, into their targets, and across the value chain, from suppliers through their operations and all the way to their customers and their end users. And they have managed to set a plan for how to achieve profit today, how to grow tomorrow, and also how to be sustainable for the future. And the two companies we have with us today, Ericsson and Scania, are managing this balance in a very successful way. And we will hear from them in what ways they are doing this shortly. And if we take another example, another Swedish company that exemplifies this very well is actually IKEA. As you all know, IKEA is a global furniture company with a massive purchasing power. IKEA's value chain affects millions of people on a daily basis, and the way it is operated has the power to change whole communities. So to be a socially, economically, and environmentally positive force has pushed IKEA to take a greater responsibility for the communities in which they operate, and also to expand their business into areas which are not really their core. So for example, IKEA works with responsible sourcing, where they set out sharp sustainability requirements for environmental, social, and working conditions, with all IKEA's first and second tier suppliers must follow. And then IKEA also run a transparent system for responsible recruitment of migrant workers at first tier suppliers in identified critical areas to provide economic opportunities for people at the margin of the economy. And last but not least, IKEA also invests in and owns its own renewable energy production to power all their stores worldwide and to be energy independent. And they do this not only because it is right for the planet, but because it actually enables IKEA to lower their product prices and also to reach even more consumers in price-sensitive markets. So it is good business. And IKEA, Ericsson and Scania are not unique to Swedish industry. Many of the Swedish companies are in the forefront when it comes to integrating a sustainable approach to business, both in their strategy and operations. So what has been some of the key success factors then for these companies? First of all, I would say stretched targets. Shortly after the Paris Agreement, Sweden became the first country to introduce legislation committing it to be climate neutral before 2045. And this has put pressure also on the businesses to raise the bar. Second, strict environmental regulations in combination with high wages. This has driven companies to focus on efficiency and automation, which has in turn spurred innovation and also incentivized the use of latest technology in their solutions and operations. Third, the partnership between public and private sector. And this has really been a prerequisite to enable large and risky investments that companies would not have done on their own. And I think this will become even more critical in the future, where we have initiatives such as carbon capture, storage technologies, etc., that will become even more important. And then finally, the fourth one, long-term priorities above short-term commercial interests. A tradition in Sweden of political consensus has created the stability necessary to make long-term investment decisions. Even though administrations change, and they have done many times, the long-term direction has remained. And this has given companies predictability and stability, which has in turn given confidence to both the companies and to the shareholders to invest for the future. So how has this impacted on Swedish businesses in Malaysia? As His Excellency mentioned, there are close to 100 companies present in Malaysia, where majority of them also have a global presence. We have companies across all sectors, such as manufacturing, ICT, healthcare, transport, etc. And as previously shared, sustainable business is a top priority among all these companies, and something that goes across the value chain and is rolled out throughout their company strategies, business plans, and also their corporate cultures. Through their leadership and business models, it is really impressive to see how the companies in Malaysia actively work together with their customers, with their employees, and the government to reduce their environmental impact and to contribute to a positive social development. And we will hear more about this in a minute from David and from Ellen. So to conclude, sustainability is not an area that can sit in a separate silo. Risks related to sustainability needs to be assessed, and they need to be mapped out at the same level as other strategic or operational risks in a company. They have the potential to impact prices and costs, supply chain and operations, employee retention, customer satisfaction, and also competition. And on top of that, if we dare to go beyond the damage control and the compliance, there is actually money to be made here. Sustainability is an opportunity to invest in. So with that, I would like to say thank you. And now I would like us to listen to those who actually walk the talk. I'm very happy to have both Ericsson and Scania with us today to share their experiences. And I would like to start to introduce Ellen Alarilla from Ericsson. Ellen was appointed as Ericsson's program manager for sustainability and corporate responsibility for the Southeast Asia, Oceania, and India market in 2014. She's responsible for Ericsson's SCR activities, programs, and projects in the area, which revolve around the company's focus areas, environmental sustainability and digital inclusion. Prior to this role, Ellen held regional and local roles within Ericsson's marketing and communications function and was a member of Ericsson Philippines leadership team. And she has also held regional and local roles in communications for multinational companies in electronics and engineering, logistics, and telecommunications. Ellen, handing over to you.
Thank you very much. I will just try to quickly share my screen. Yeah, so His Excellency Dag Gulin Danfeld, Dr. Gary Teixeira, and Commissioner Sarah Hedden, good afternoon, and good afternoon to everyone who has joined us today for this webinar. It's our honor, it's also our pleasure to be invited to this activity, so we would like to thank the Climate Governance Malaysia for organizing this event. I'd like to take one slide to just quickly introduce who we are as Ericsson. So we are a world leader in ICT and 5G, and we provide telecommunications equipment, software, and services to the world's leading telecommunications companies. We are 144 years old globally, but it is actually our 55th year of operations in Malaysia this year. We're present in 180 countries, and we have almost 100,000 employees around the world. We have 4 different business areas, and these are networks, digital services, managed services, and technology, and new businesses. Under networks, we provide radio, transport, and related services so that our communications operators can build their networks. Digital services is a software-driven business for Ericsson. Managed services is a service that we provide to our customers where we are actually running their mobile networks for them so that they can in turn focus on providing services to their end users. And in technology and new businesses, we are focusing on new revenue streams that would involve upcoming new technologies such as IoT. For Ericsson, sustainability and corporate responsibility is really about mitigating risk, but at the same time also generating positive impact for society. And what we believe is that connectivity empowers an intelligent, sustainable, and connected world. And towards this end, we have 3 focus areas in sustainability and corporate responsibility, which are responsible business, environmental sustainability, and digital inclusion. Now, all of the work that we do under these focus areas support SDG goals 9 and 17. SDG 9 because it directly relates to what we do as a business, and then 17 because we have proven that it is through partnerships that we are able to do more and to do things faster in reaching the SDG goals. Under responsible business, this is where we strengthen and develop responsible business practices to solidify our position as a trusted partner around the world. So it is under this area that we do things such as human rights impact assessments, anti-corruption efforts, everything that we do in OHS and also in responsible sourcing. In digital inclusion, what we do here is to advocate to ensure that those who need connectivity are able to benefit the most. And we do have programs that focus on education and on disaster response. It's interesting to note that we've done research to show that a 10% increase in mobile broadband, for example, would allow the country to register a 0.8% increase in GDP. But for today's webinar, I think we would like to share a bit more on what we do under environmental sustainability. So in environmental sustainability, we seek to minimize any negative impacts of our operations, and then we also make sure that we are producing the most energy efficient products and solutions for our customers so that we can be sure to contribute positively to society. And we truly believe that environmental sustainability positively impacts planetary health. And towards this end, we have done a number of things in this area, but we will focus on 2 aspects for today. The first of which is the Science-Based Targets Initiative. Ericsson joined this in 2017 as part of our commitment to the Paris Climate Agreement. And what we have done here is to help set targets that will help limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. So what we have done is to lay out the groundwork and to make science-based recommendations for ICT companies such as Ericsson to take that would ensure that the temperature rise will be limited to 1.5 degrees or lower. We have also worked within Ericsson and with our customers to address the rising costs of energy for our customers. We have estimated that the cost of energy in running mobile networks would be about 25 billion per year. And we see that this is not going to be sustainable if energy requirements and energy costs increase over the years, especially now that the customer operators are getting ready to deploy 5G. So we have done a report entitled Breaking the Energy Curve, where we have shown that using solutions that are already now present in our software offerings, for example, it will be possible to actually decrease the energy requirements that our customers would need moving forward. And the best part is that they can implement these existing solutions at any time, regardless of where they are in the deployment of their 5G networks. And we think that by doing all of these things, we will be able to be carbon neutral by 2030, which is our goal for Ericsson. So all of the targets that we have are published annually in our sustainability report. And for the science-based targets, we have set 35% as our target, both for the reduction of carbon dioxide emissions from our own activities and as the energy savings target for Ericsson radio systems compared to our legacy portfolio. And both of these targets are things that we would like to achieve by 2022. When it comes to the 5G product portfolio, our ambition is that they should be at least 10 times more energy efficient than the 4G product portfolio, again by 2022. And as of 2019, we're pleased to report that we are on track towards achieving these targets. We have also been the sole corporate entity to join the Exponential Roadmap initiative. And what this has culminated to is a report that shows how we can effectively cut global carbon emissions in half by the year 2030. And the report outlines 36 different solutions that are ready to implement right now. These are existing solutions that would help different sectors of industry to cut their global emissions. It's interesting to note that industry accounts for about 1/3 of the total global greenhouse gas emissions. So that's why the Exponential Roadmap initiative has focused on this part. And that the carbon footprint of the ICT sector is actually pretty small. We contribute less than 2%. It's only 1.4% of global emissions. But at the same time, it is the ICT sector that has the biggest potential to enable greenhouse gas reductions of up to 15% in other sectors by 2030. And this can be done through digitalization. So we looked at different sectors such as agricultural, travel, transport, smart grids, smart work solutions, building management, and services. And we think that if all of these sectors were to pursue digitalization widely in all of their business processes, then it should be possible to get at least 15% potential greenhouse gas emissions reduction by 2030. So 15% is about 10 gigatons, according to recent Ericsson estimates. And one thing that we would like to mention, although this is not really an agricultural project, we think that it could be applied to the agriculture sector, and it definitely has the potential to also be applied towards climate mitigation solutions. In 2015, we started a purely employee volunteer-led project called the Connected Mangroves in Kampung Dato Hormat in Sabak, Burnam. And what we have done there is to address a problem that the local community was facing, in that they had to reforest their denuded mangrove ecosystem there, but that no matter what they did, it seemed that the mangroves were not growing as fast or as well as they had hoped. So they asked us a question on how technology can address this problem. And what we did was to put sensors in the soil and in the water, and also a camera system that would allow them to view what was happening on site. The data from the sensors is ported on an online dashboard that the community can then check, and then they can correct the situation as necessary. So what we have seen is that from 1 year, after 1 year of having this solution in the community, from a 40% success rate and growth and maturity rate of the mangroves, they reached 80% growth and maturity rates just after 1 year. So we can see here that a very small sapling planted in 2017 has grown maybe 6 or 7 feet tall in 2019. And even now, when you go to this community in Kampung, Dato, Hormat, it's not possible to actually go inside the planting site anymore because it's completely overgrown by mangrove forests. But that's what we want, because that means a better ecosystem for the community. They are more protected from typhoons and storm surges. And it really shows the power of IoT to address environmental, climate, and even agricultural issues. We're looking forward to expanding this project as we go along our operations this year. So in conclusion, connectivity and ICT really positively impacts planetary health, and this can be shown in what we have seen across our three focus areas in responsible business, environmental sustainability, and digital inclusion. And we really look forward to working in partnership with government, with different industry sectors, and with academia so that we can create more value for Malaysian society. There's a lot more information that we have on sustainability, and if you would be interested, this is a QR code that will take you to our sustainability page. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Very inspiring to see the work you are doing both globally across industries and also specifically with the mangroves here in Malaysia as well. Now, let me introduce, I'm very happy to introduce David Lantz from Scania. Since April 2016, David has been the sustainability manager at Scania Southeast Asia, where he is in charge of sharing Scania's 129 years of experience in developing sustainable transport systems with growing cities in the region. He has been based in Malaysia since 2010, and prior to joining Scania, he worked for Business Sweden, where he as a project manager and commercial liaison to the Asian Development Bank was in charge of sharing the combined experiences of the Swedish transportation industry to growing cities in Southeast Asia, covering areas such as integrated city planning, bus rapid transit systems, and congestion charging. Welcome, David. Handing over to you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Sarah. And for those of you who don't know us, we are one of the world's largest and one of the world's leading providers of sustainable transport solutions, covering commercial vehicles such as trucks, buses, but also industrial engines. As Sarah mentioned, we were founded back in 1891, so we've been around for 129 years. Currently, we are present in about 100 markets around the world, and next year we're very proud to celebrate 50 years in Malaysia. And at Scania, we are driving the shift. It's actually our purpose to drive the shift towards a more sustainable transport system. And what do we then mean with sustainable? Well, a transport system that has the minimal possible impact on the environment, while at the same time, it enables the movement of people and goods, and it drives growth and drives the economy. After all, the transport system is really the lifeblood of our society, something that became very clear during the recent COVID pandemic, and when everything shut down, our trucks were still running and delivering vital goods, food, for instance, to the supermarkets. At Scania, we are genuinely committed to the global sustainability agenda. And that's why we're one of the signatories to UN Global Compact. Today I would like to share our experience from Malaysia on working with promoting better health, which is a very, very relevant topic right now, of course, but also climate action, which is the main focus of today's session, and trying to tie it up on how we all can work together and how we're already working together in partnerships to drive the shift towards a more sustainable transport system. And this year, we took a radical leap forward when it comes to climate action and goal number 13, as we signed up for, as the first automotive manufacturer, we signed up for climate-based, science-based targets. And basically this commits us to lower our own CO2 footprint from our own operations with 50% by 2025 compared to 2015. But more importantly, it also commits us to lower the emissions, the carbon emissions from when our customers use our vehicles. And this is, and 20% doesn't maybe sound like that much, but we have to remember that 96% of all the emissions that we are in some way or form related to is coming from the use of our vehicles and not from our own operations. So this is a very, very ambitious target. And so far, we are the only one in our industry who have signed up for this. So in Malaysia, we have very ambitious plans for how to cut down our own carbon emission targets. We have plans for how to work with energy efficiency. We work with that on all levels of the organization, out in our workshops, always looking for areas to improve, how to become more efficient, how to become more productive, and how to use less electricity. But what's more interesting and what I will focus on today is what we're doing to lower our customers' CO2 emissions. So the easiest and the first thing that we need to do is to simply use less fuel. We know from experience that by optimizing the vehicles, by training our customers, drivers, and coaching them, continuously coaching them, we know that we can lower fuel consumption with 10%. And 10% reduction in fuel consumption is a 10% reduction of operational cost, which our customers very much like, of course, but it's also a 10% reduction in CO2 emissions. And that's why we can say that it's profitable. Even in Malaysia, it's profitable to be sustainable. But to reach that 20% reduction, we have to go beyond only saving fuel. We have to do more. So what more things can we do in Malaysia? Sorry, 1 second. I got to the wrong slide in my presentation. Well, we need to shift away. We need to shift away from fossil fuels. We need to shift towards more sustainable options. We need to shift towards biofuels. We need to shift towards electric vehicles. And today we can run on all fuels that are commercially available today. Biodiesel is something that is widely available in Malaysia, and we fully support Malaysia's plans to blend more biodiesel into the regular diesel. Currently, we're at a B10 blend, and we're going to a B20 blend. A B20 blend will give approximately a 10% reduction in CO2 emissions, which again is very good. And Malaysia is really taking the lead in the region in doing this. We have seen some things going on in Indonesia, but Malaysia is doing it on a whole different scale. So we really look forward to see this happening in mid next year. But to ensure that our vehicles are future-proof and our customers can go even further, because we have some customers that are interested in going even further. All new vehicles that we deliver in Malaysia that was ordered since December last year, they are prepared to run from anything from 0% biodiesel all the way up to 100% biodiesel. So we can support our customers to become even more sustainable. And if they do so, they would reduce CO2 emissions with up to 85%. I just want to stress that regardless of what fuel we use to work with driver training, driver coaching, optimizing the vehicle, and ecolution partnerships like we do is still relevant. It's still the first step. And I would just like to highlight that again, because I think I missed that slide, to be honest, that as of to date, we have entered into 29 ecolution partnerships. This is something that we launched as early as last year, and so far we have managed to reduce close to, I think it is 500 tons of CO2, which is the equivalent of planting something like 9,000 trees. And all of this we're doing at the same time as we're saving cost for our customers. So it's truly a win-win. But let's get back to the more renewable fuels, the biofuels that are available, and also shifting to electric vehicles. Now, electric vehicles is also something that is very, very interesting. We have had electric city buses on the roads in Malaysia for a few years already, running out in Putrajaya. And we recently launched our new electric truck in Sweden, back in Europe. And we have reached a point where it is commercially viable in some places to run a battery electric vehicle. Specifically for city distributions. What is driving this is really the city's demands to create zero emission zones. You're basically not allowed to bring in a combustion vehicle into the cities anymore. So this will definitely drive a shift. But why don't we see this in Malaysia then? How come we see biofueled vehicles in Europe, a lot of them? How come we see electric vehicles in Europe and we don't see much of that at all here? Well, the simple answer to that question is that most of this is driven by regulation. And as our ambassador has already mentioned, we've been quite successful in pushing for that type of change back in Sweden. And today, the diesel is heavily taxed in Sweden, for instance, while electricity is very inexpensive and very affordable. And so is the biofuel. It's also very affordable. In Malaysia, the situation is the opposite. The biofuel is the one that's being taxed, while the fossil fuel is the one being subsidized. At the same time, electricity is also very expensive in Malaysia. So this is the biggest challenge that we face when it comes to goal number 13. There's a lot more we can do to lower the CO2 emissions by working with more customers and working with their fuel savings. We have just started. There's definitely more we can do, but if we want to do more, if Malaysia wants to do more, we have to do more. All of us have to do more, and the government has to support this even more moving forward. So what can we do then? What's the easiest thing we can do here in Malaysia? Well, the quickest fix that we have in the transport system would be to run the existing city buses, the diesel city buses, on biodiesel. This is something we looked into. We've discussed with the government several times. We know roughly what it will require, and we're ready to do this fairly quickly. For future investments, of course, electric buses are very, very interesting for the government to consider. But for right here, right now, running city buses on biodiesel, locally Malaysian-made biodiesel, considering that Malaysia is, after all, one of the world's largest producers of biodiesel, is the fastest thing that we can do. But we also encourage, and we know that there are some developments from Malaysia to consider biofuels in general, and not only limit the incentive programs that are in place, the green investment tax allowance, and also the green financing schemes that are available to electric vehicles, and also opening this up to biofuel vehicles, because we need to have something in the more short term right now, because it's going to take quite some time before we can run electric vehicles in Malaysia. Because these are all commercial vehicles. The operational cost is what drives our customers to select what type of vehicle they will run. So that is very, very important to remember. So far, we have been talking about carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. And this is all related to global warming, of course. This is bad for the environment, it's bad for the planet. But equally important, I would also like to just take a few minutes to share our thoughts on goal number 3, good health. And talk a little bit about local emissions, which is something very different. Local emissions is pollution, it's haze, it's smog, it's the particles that we see. According to the World Health Organization, about 6,250 people in Malaysia every year, deaths in Malaysia every year, can be contributed to air pollution. And unfortunately, the commercial vehicle industry is a big contributor to that. About 50% of that can be attributed to the use of diesel in heavy-duty transport. There is a solution to this, and that's what's known as emission technology. And we're very glad to see that Malaysia is taking a step forward and is going to go for what is known as Euro 2 to a Euro 4 emissions technology that would definitely cut emissions a lot. Again, we encourage Malaysia to do a little bit more and take an even further step and go all the way to Euro 5. The reason why we think that Euro 5 is an even better move is quite simple. The fuel is very, very good in Malaysia and can run in a Euro 5 engine without a problem. The Euro 5 engine doesn't cost much more money, and it will lower emissions even further with another 21%. So there are definitely things that we can do in Malaysia to lower and improve public health together. So to summarize, I think that the way to do this is to do this in partnership. So we work in partnerships with our customers, and we work in partnership with the government. And again, we're already doing all of these things, and we see a lot of good progress. And we're very confident that if we can partner up even more and expand these partnerships, that we can truly achieve and drive the shift towards a more sustainable transport system that's more sustainable in terms of its impact on the environment, but also more sustainable in terms of its impact on our lives and our health. That's all I've had to share, and I look forward to take your questions.
Thank you so much, David, for a very interesting and inspiring presentation, and with some great to see some clear actions and activities as well, and examples on what you are doing already in Malaysia. So let us start. We got a few minutes left of the session, so I thought it would be time for some Q&A. So for the participants, if you have any questions, please write them in the chat, and I will pick them up from there. And I can actually start by picking up, David, on the importance that you talked about related to partnership. And I would like to direct that question to the same question to Dr. Gary, actually, who also talked about the importance of partnership between government and private sector. Dr. Gary, what are the factors that you see are most critical to have in place to make a partnership successful? And what are the immediate next steps that can be taken from your perspective in Malaysia?
Yeah, first, thank you very much for the question. I believe that partnerships are one way to achieve very quick wins and moving forward the agenda for both clean air as well as for climate change, climate response, climate action, and sustainability. I think that what would really create the correct kind of ecosystem for this collaboration is actually a great deal of clarity in terms of the regulatory framework that is provided by the government, as well as increased engagement and dialogue between the government and the private sector. In this regard, I think that the Climate Governance Malaysia initiative will actually take us a long way by bringing into the dialogue actual board members who play a key role in deciding the decision that businesses take. I believe that strengthening this engagement between government entities as well as the private sector can move us a long way. I think a key area that's already being looked into is the area of the current emissions thresholds and enforcement levels, because I think that governments in general are moving from extremely rigid types of regulations to a regulatory framework that is more agile and is able to respond to what the science is calling for in terms of emissions. Now, especially in light of the rapid development of new technologies, new options for fuels, and in particular, as we look forward, ability of some of the more advanced fuel cell type technologies to work on multiple fuels. So I believe that this dialogue already has begun. This engagement is ongoing, and I see only rapid improvement and stronger and more coordinated movement between the private sector and the government in terms of moving us toward a greater and more sustainable future for Malaysia and for the private sector. Thanks. I think you are still muted, Sarah.
Yeah, so I don't think.
I was. Thank you so much for. Thank you, Dr. Gary, for that. Exactly, and very inspiring to hear. I mean, that increased dialogue is really the key, and it seems like, David, that what you pointed out as well is that is already, from your perspective, already ongoing as well. Do you have anything other to add, David, from your end, when it comes to the partnership?
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that's already ongoing, and I think Malaysia has gotten quite far, both in how the partnerships that we have developed with our customers, but also the partnerships that we developed together with our customers, with the government, and all the engagements that we have with all the different government and government agencies driving all and responsible for all of this policy development. So that's very good. However, it's the start. It's a good start, and there are no such things as a quick fix. There is no one solution. We have to continue to we need to continue to have this dialogue. It will take a lot of time and take a lot of effort, so we just have to have the perseverance to keep on pushing each other to see what we can do. So I look forward to, and I really hope that we can continue these dialogues and expand these dialogues in the years to come.
Very good. I'll keep you, David, for another second here, because we got a question from one of the attendees, from Ibrahim. How can youth groups in Malaysia support Scania on the sustainable transport system?
How youth groups can support the sustainable transport system?
To lead to a sustainable transport system and industry, yeah. Amongst the highest users of transportation in Malaysia, especially when it comes to motorcycles as well.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting point to bring up, because when I've been traveling around Malaysia and visiting our workshops, visiting our own staff, but also visiting our customers, what we see is that the awareness about climate change is much more, it's much greater than I ever could have anticipated. I thought this was something that we were talking about in KL, but the matter of fact is, and especially among the younger generations, the awareness is quite impressive. And it's interesting that especially our coach bus customers and their customers, are a lot of young people traveling from one city to the next. They are very keen to this. So a lot of our Ecolution partners are the coach bus customers, and they get a lot of good feedback from their customers traveling between the cities. So that's very interesting, and I think that's something that where the youth can get, if they want to get more involved, that's something you can do. You vote with your wallet as well. Try to put pressure and choose these providers, or if it's coach bus company, or if you're flying somewhere, you're buying a product, you can always choose something that is more more sustainable, more environmentally conscious. So that's something you can do directly. Engage in conversations with them, set up meetings, try to get them to do more. We would be most happy to participate in such engagements as well.
Great. I realize that we're on the hour now. It's 2 o'clock. Why do we have time for one more question? Or...
Yes, we do.
All right, let me just, I've got one question for Ellen here. So it was very inspiring to hear about the 50% potential reduction in emissions that the ICT industry can potentially contribute to, while only being responsible for 1.4 of the global emissions. So what sectors specifically in Malaysia do you see that Ericsson has a possibility to contribute to the most? And what are some of the concrete activities you are doing to make it happen?
Well, we think that we have the potential to collaborate with different sectors and partners in Malaysia to address all sectors that we were looking at when we were doing the exponential roadmap initiative. And so potentially we could help to tackle transport, smart work initiatives, building management, and so on. But I think one area that we have actively been working on is on the Connected Mangroves initiative. So as I mentioned earlier, it's not strictly agricultural, but we think that it does have the potential to be implemented in the agriculture sector, which is also a growth engine for Malaysia's economy. And I think Dr. Gary mentioned earlier the challenges around water that the country would like to address. And we have actually deployed these kinds of solutions in Sweden, where we have developed an algorithm that would allow for the detection and the prevention of pollutants from entering the country's water system, for example. So these are two examples of things that we think we could immediately address in Malaysia.
Very good. Thank you so much, Ellen.
Thank you.
Great. So again, we're getting over time here. So I would like to thank you, Ellen and David, for sharing your examples of what you are doing and your long-term plans as well for Malaysia and for the region. Very inspiring to hear. So with that, thank you. I'm handing over to you then now, Ms. Leong, to close and wrap up the session.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and to all of you who have made this webinar happen. I've learned a lot from all the speakers as well as from the Q&A session. And I hope that you have enjoyed learning and found an inspiration that you could take back to your workplace to bring about positive change. The next Climate Governance Malaysia webinar is about pressing ahead with the renewable energy agenda. And it will take place on the 11th of November at 3 p.m. So thank you for attending, and stay safe and stay productive in a sustainable way. Goodbye.